Welcome back to the Tydirium Hangar. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about Haslab, Star Wars. What can we get funded for the Star Wars Black Series? We saw that the Reva lightsaber failed. Nobody was surprised about that. Hasbro let the Rancor fail, and we do need to get into talking about what Haslab has turned into these days versus where it was when it started. With the His tank being the 6-inch vehicle that was actually made, how come Star Wars can't do it? G.I. Joe can do it, but Star Wars cannot. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what are viable options for a Star Wars Haslab that will actually fund. I've talked about all of these in the past. Maybe not all of them, but some of the ones in the past still make a lot of sense today. Some keep getting requested over and over and over and make absolutely no sense whatsoever. But I'm going to talk to you today about what I think would actually fund and what would fund for Star Wars Black Series. Because the Razor Crest was more or less a smashing success, and it's a pretty good vehicle. So let's talk about this and more on the Tydirium Hangar coming up. Okay, first on the list is the Sandcrawler. Jawa Sandcrawler is very iconic in Star Wars. Now that's one big point. And the other thing is the fact that it's in a lot of media and all that kind of stuff, but it looks really awesome. It has to be big. It has got to be big to be to scale. Not only was it in the original trilogy, it was in the prequels, and it was in The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian seems to be one of the best of the TV shows. The best of the TV shows in performance right now. We don't know how Andor will perform, but Mandalorian still is on the top for the live-action TV shows for Star Wars. Now, looking at this side by side, if you have a Razor Crest, then you know how big this Sandcrawler needs to be, and that's for vintage collection, not even for Star Wars Black Series. See, now Disney's made a Sandcrawler. It's bigger than the vintage, but it's still not even truly to scale. It does not actually scale with the vintage collection, so a Haslab would be needed to make it bigger, and it would look better, better paint apps, and better presentation. We will not get an accurately scaled one, or even one scaled closer to accurate size. It probably will never be to scale, but it'll be more along the lines of the BMF, the big Millennium Falcon, and of course the BMF AT-AT, but it would not function at retail, or even, it wouldn't even function properly as an online exclusive. Although many generations would love to have a Jawa Sandcrawler, I think Hasbro is trying to get their first Star Wars Black Series Haslab off the ground, and this is not viable. Next up is the Tandem 4, or the Rebel Blockade Runner, and this is one that I would like to see made because it's, of course, in the original trilogy and all of the other iterations, many different iterations of Star Wars, meaning the sequel trilogy, end of the prequels, so it makes sense, and it's iconic, and if you make this thing big enough, I would say make it about the size of the sail barge. But here's the problem. The problem is it needs to be about 10 times the size of the sail barge. And that's where the problem comes in. You'll never get this thing to scale. That's where the problem is with everybody. It's a holy grail of holy grails, like the White Witch, but the White Witch is for droids, but this is for actual Star Wars. So this means 1,000 times more than finding the White Witch. If somebody can find this prototype and we could copy it and make it, I actually think we're at the level right now that you could take this picture and designers could make almost identical for the original Kenner line, but this would be a nice add-in, an included one, because it would be so small in comparison to what they would have to make, and it would probably have to be at the $500 price point. In fact, there are customizers that have made them, and I thought this was made for a resale, and I could not find the actual page. I was going to credit it and put it in the comments below, and if you do know whoever made this for resale, a customizer, I would love to credit them and put a link down below so people can buy one, because this looks very nice, but then again, this isn't really scaled for Haslab. This is scaled in more like the original Kenner one. Sadly, even his appearance in the new media isn't enough for Hasbro. It seems like Hasbro wants to force down our throats whatever is in the here and the now, whatever they made up last week. They don't want something that was from tradition, that has roots in Star Wars. No, they want something that was just made up last week, and they wanted to sell in the millions. And that's not how things work in 2022. By the way, this would be massive if we made it for the Black Series. Out of the question, it's barely even an option for the vintage collection. Next up is obviously a Black Series impossibility, the Death Star. The Death Star, it's kind of like the problem we had with Unicron. Unicron is nowhere near anything in the realms of scale. But we had to accept the fact that you have to make it only so big at some point. At some point, how big is an actual full-on production going to be? Now, I know that there's somebody out there that's going to make a full-on Transformers Metroplex, but that's a different story. Now, here we go with this Death Star. We can kind of look and see what did Lego do and kind of triple the size of that and then refine that. So people have asked me for a long time, how come Hasbro doesn't see what Lego's doing and how successful Lego is? And Lego's not successful just because you put it together yourself. It's successful because once you put it together, there's a lot of functionality to it. And I don't personally collect these, but I'm intrigued with how they bring about a toy, a playset, an entire immersive environment. That is fantastic. But how come we don't get that from Hasbro? I don't know. You'd think it'd be even easier from Hasbro to do something along the lines of this. There are many examples of attempts at Death Stars and stuff like that from different various scales and all that, but not for actual Star Wars Black Series. Now, I think it would actually make sense to do maybe just the throne room environment, and of course that would cost you heavily, kind of like what they're doing with the Jabba throne room, or the, I guess it's the Mandalorian Jabba Palace throne room, but that thing's like $235, and it is not a Haslab, and it blows my mind. How come you have to do Haslabs for other things but not that? But anyway, this is another sort of idea, like what would you do? How would you space it out? How would you set it up? At the end of the day, the Death Star is off the table. I don't see, why not just go get a vintage one, piece one together or whatever. They're not really all that expensive. I looked them up on eBay and there are tons of them. Getting them complete, now all the little pieces, they make repro parts these days, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. So getting a Death Star from Kenner for your 3.75 inch. Now when it comes to something like the Black Series, it's going to have to be just a diorama of one space of the Death Star. So next up, the Imperial Shuttle Tydirium. Now this is something that it's kind of confusing in a way because there's not much playability other than the core of the ship. So the wings take up the vast majority. So this thing would be huge. The vintage one is already massive. So making it for, like, let's say you make it to scale for vintage collection, that would still be huge. It would be bigger than what we already have. But I think it's still viable for vintage collection. Completely out of the question for Star Wars Black Series. And we saw that because of the TIE Fighter. See, I would buy this as a Haslab that was as big as the TIE Fighter they made for Star Wars Black Series, but I am just a little bit of a freak when it comes to these. I have way too many, but I love this design as the best ship in Star Wars, hands down, by far. When you start looking at getting a complete one in good condition in the vintage, is pushing $600 and $700. That gets you into Haslab territory. And that's the way I believe. If a vintage one in good condition is pushing Haslab territory, why not make the Haslab one anyway? Now, there's a lot of holes in that theory, and the big hole in that theory is the fact that maybe only 100 people are interested in buying the vintage one for that price. There may be thousands of people looking to buy a vintage one in the $200 to $300 range, but maybe only 100 willing to spend $600, $700, $800 on one of these. So will there be 8,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 that are willing to drop down $600 for a vintage collection one of these? Maybe not. I'd be in on it. Okay, so let's get down to reality. We have the AT-ST. And the thing about the AT-ST is the fact that it is big enough that it would be impressive on a shelf. And it is one of those vehicles that is very iconic. And we've seen it pop up here and there in the media and all of that. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see it reused again in live action pretty soon. Also, looking at 2023 is what, 40th anniversary of 1983. So that would be the Return of the Jedi era. And would we have a Haslab associated with that? That would make a lot of sense, right? And then also thinking about this is that if you made this full on big enough for Star Wars Black Series, it'd be way too big for retail. and it wouldn't sell. In fact, they struggled at retail with the Legacy. The Legacy one is big, it's beautiful, it looks fantastic, they did a good job with it, but it has stability issues, serious stability issues. And for that, they would need the Haslab one to fix those ratchets. I know people complain about the Sentinel knee and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like they would have the ratchets fixed to the point to where it would hold this massive beast up if they made it for the Star Wars Black Series. I think this is pushing the edge of the envelope for how big it is, but it still feels similar in size scale, mid-size, like a HISS tank. Now these are pictures of, what does that look like to you? Well, it looks like to me an ATST and all of the parts that you need. It also looks to me like we have some gears in there. It also looks like to me it's heavy duty, like they are planning on this doing some serious work. And this is very professional. We're not talking about someone with homemade stuff here. This looks very professional. Can you look at the rest of this? Look at the massive level of detail that has gone into every aspect of this. And this is unpainted. So one of the things when you look at grayscale unpainted, I look at that a lot with the Transformers community. You see the grayscale unpainted stuff and you see all of this detail. You can put your mind around how amazing it looks once you have paint apps put on it. And generally with Haslab, they have way more paint apps. I don't even know the number. I think 100 different paint apps to the Haslabs versus what you get with the standard mainline release. So that's another thing, another reason Haslab is a dream project is because we have all the excessive paint apps to it. Obviously there'd be some features, some unlock features to it. The other thing that makes this viable for Haslab is a lot of times you'd want more than one of these, and this makes sense for more than one. And I don't think it would be super expensive. It wouldn't be the $500 price point. It would probably be the $300 price point. But we're going to get into what Haslab's become and not what it was or what I want it to be. We're going to get into that in just a bit, but you're probably going to have a bunch of unlocks with figures, special figures that we haven't seen yet, and all of that kind of stuff, and then repaints of figures and those kinds of things, and add-ons. Who knows what add-on for Return of the Jedi? Pretty exciting, right? Okay, what exactly has Haslab become? Instead of a dream project, dream projects, it's turned into a bundle system. So, like, instead of just getting a PS5 and say, I want a PS5, if you go to GameStop, whenever they get a PS5 in, it has to be a bundle set. You get a bundle. They say, oh, we're going to fight the bots with this. No, they're selling you junk you don't want or need. And for that, you're stuck with games you don't want to play. You're stuck with things you don't want. And you have to buy this as a bundle. Now, Haslab, most of the stuff that they put in are things that you want. But if you were to get every single tier and give everybody an option, I guarantee you, you will not get 100% of those options selected by everybody. There was time when Haslab was for big dream projects. And I have to tell you that so many people were skeptical about this cell barge, and there was so much negativity on my channel when I was pushing for this, and I told people I bought 3, then at the last minute I decided I was going to buy 5. And so many people were saying that it's going to drop in value, nobody would pay for $5. And I was like, well, I don't really care. I wanted one to keep sealed, one to open, and then I started selling them. And, you know, they were selling pretty well, actually. And I think the price on this is higher now than ever. But that doesn't change the fact that I enjoy my display. I enjoy having one of these in my collection. And it still blows my mind every time I look at it that it was ever even made by Hasbro. It blows my mind. But, you know, the HISS tank's all right, but it's not going to have anywhere near the presence as this. So, what do you think they're going to make for the next Haslab? Do you think it will be the ATST? Do you think that this is actually pictures of... am I going to get in trouble for this? Pictures of the next Haslab? Who knows, because it'd be pretty exciting. Should they make the shuttle Tydirium for Tydirium hangar, and for me, personally, so I can have a new one of these? Does the Tandem 4 make sense? Because we've all been wanting it since the intro scene in the first 1977 Star Wars movie. Should we just let the Disney Sandcrawler be the best Sandcrawler ever made aside from the Vintage one? Should we all be asking for an 8-foot tall and 8-foot wide Death Star? Or should we give Rancor another chance? Let me know in the comments below, like and subscribe. Tydirium Hanger out.